Good morning, everyone. This is Michael O'Malley here with the Hurricane Season 2020 update, part of the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for September 8th, 2020, recorded around 10:07 a.m. Eastern Time. Well, first of all, in the tropical Atlantic this morning, we do have a lot to discuss, so let's go ahead and dive straight into it. First of all, Invest Area 94L, which is this little tiny area of disturbance right now to the south and west of Bermuda, which is right here. Again, this area is producing a fairly disorganized convection mass of showers and thunderstorms moving off towards the northwest. And again, this could bring some adverse conditions towards the Carolina coastline for you folks there. Obviously, that's going to be something to be monitoring. But again, this only really has about a 40% chance over the next 5 days. Again, strong upward with this trough of low pressure kind of digging in. This is going to be the main thing kind of hindering our system, and this trough is eventually going to also help to kind of kick off Pauletta and also Rene off towards the north and potentially into the open tropical Atlantic. In a closer up view here of our two tropical storms in the far east Atlantic, again, this is Tropical Storm Pauletta, maximum sustained winds of near 65 miles per hour and pressure down to about 995 millibars. This is what is very disorganized Tropical Storm Rene this morning. And again, the reason why it's so disorganized is it interacted with this landmass here, the Cabo Verde Islands, which does have some mountains in it, actually, surprisingly. But it is mainly some volcanic islands, which did help to disrupt the inner core structure of Rene. This is still expected to be a hurricane over the next several days, but again, it's going to have some struggles and obstacles to overcome. You notice there is also a pool of dry air off towards the north here of Rene. This is going to get entrained into the circulation from time to time, as of course a low pressure in the northern hemisphere is a counterclockwise spin, so that is going to naturally want to draw this dry air into the center. Now with Tropical Storm Pauletta, there is also some contemplating factors here, or not complicated, there's complicating factors here regarding Tropical Storm Pauletta. First of all, you notice that there is some dry air that's going to be entrained into our system. Again, this dry air pool is basically from the north. And the one reason why it's going to be kind of getting in is because we have some southwesterly shear that's going to start being impinged on Pauletta from an a tropical upper tropospheric trough, a TUT feature. And this is basically an upper level low that's kind of sprawling across the North Atlantic and helping to induce vertical wind shear. That vertical wind shear is going to start to tilt over our vortex, and that's going to induce dry air being entrained into our system. So that is going to potentially help to kind of limit our storm over the next several days and keep it on the weaker end. Now you can see here from the National Hurricane Center at 10 o'clock, or at 8 o'clock this morning rather, we do have this other wave coming off of Africa that has a 70% chance over the next couple of days. This one is going to be one to watch over the next few days for potential land threats. Again, too early to determine that right now. But this is going to be coming off at a little bit of a lower latitude than Rene and Pauletta did. Thus, this will have a better chance at staying at a lower latitude throughout its journey. And obviously, this is Invest Area 94L, which does have a small smidgen of a chance to become a tropical cyclone as it approaches the Carolina coastline. Again, generally, the impacts will remain gusty winds, heavy rainfall, nothing that is kind of out of the ordinary, basically. But it is something to watch just in case if this does become a quick spin-up tropical cyclone. We saw that with Tropical Storm Bertha earlier this year, where quickly ramped up along the South Carolina coastline. So that's going to be something to watch here. But again, not really significantly concerned about that at the current moment in time. And of course, our two tropical storms out here as well. Speaking of Paulette, though, we do have maximum sustained winds at the 5 o'clock advisory at about 50, but the automated tropical cyclone forecasting, the ATCF guidance was updated to include it at 65 miles per hour, I do believe 55 knots, which should be 65 miles per hour. So this is on the upper end of a tropical storm, certainly only about 15 miles per hour away from becoming a hurricane, but it shouldn't have time to do that. Again, this is the official forecast from the National Hurricane Center. showing that Paulette is still moving off towards the northwest, and it eventually should bend back towards the west later today and tomorrow and Friday before resuming a north-northwest trajectory over the next several days. Again, for folks here in Bermuda, this is something that we're going to have to watch, again, because this cone represents any possible area where the center could be at 5 days. So it could be way off here, or it could be well south in here. So there is over about 170 nautical mile error for this to be kind of going. And there is the potential that this could be on the far western side or on the far northern side of our track here. So we're kind of splitting the difference on kind of where the track forecast is expected to go at the moment. But again, this should not be much of a problem, but for folks here in Bermuda, this is going to be something to watch here over the next couple of days. As for Tropical Storm Rene, again, a tropical storm warning remains in effect for the Cabo Verde Islands, again, for right now. This is now beginning to pull away, and the impacts should lessen as today progresses. Still moving west at 15 miles per hour, expected to become the 6th named hurricane of the Atlantic hurricane season, the 2020 Atlantic hurricane season basin by Wednesday. So probably, or by, early Thursday morning, by late, Wednesday, early Thursday, this should then strengthen into a hurricane and remain a hurricane throughout Sunday, or Saturday through Sunday, before weakening once again here into a tropical storm, moving out across the North Atlantic Basin, and once again should recurve on out to sea. But there is some uncertainties regarding that over the next several days. Now this is for Tropical Storm Paulette here. This is the 12Z model guidance suit here. And again, there's a couple of interesting things today that we have seen and kind of trending with the models. First of all, the model guidance today shows obviously that very clear westerly or even maybe a little bit of a southwesterly jog here over the next day or so, before kind of resuming more of that northwesterly, west-northwesterly track after that. Now this is where we have some pretty big model discrepancies, because you can see here on the far southern end of the track you have the HWRF model, which does gain a pretty big latitude here, but it is following more of a northwesterly trajectory, where the TVCN and TVCX models continue to bring this off, kind of more off towards the northerly direction at this component, at this moment in time. And most of the models seem to be following that general north kind of track, something like that, and then eventually turning on out to sea. So again, whether the HWRF is correct or not really doesn't explicitly matter at this point, but what does matter is how weak Pauletta does get within this time frame. Strong upper level winds are going to be cutting across here, which we'll kind of show here in a moment, which should weaken our storm down through this time. But you can see there's considerable model spread even within hour 72, and that's mainly due to how weak Paulette gets. The weaker that Pauletta does get in the short term is the further west it is going to move. So something like the HWRF solution, which is weaker, does manage to get this further west than the multi-model consensus guidance. So that's something that we'll have to watch. As for Rene here, again, most of the models today are suggesting that a recurve on out to sea here. But once again, this could also make a recurve, but maybe even kind of do a loop-de-loop or something similar to that, as a ridge of high pressure builds to the north of it, and then it kind of sends this on a little bit of a roller coaster ride. So right now, again, the TVCN and TVCX, which is again the multi-model consensus, generally bring this on kind of a loop-de-loop. So this could be something that we're going to have to watch pretty carefully to see kind of what overly happens. As of right now, the official forecast from the Hurricane Center is on the far left of the track guidance. So I'd suggest to kind of see this be shifted further off towards the east or towards the right at the 11 o'clock advisory package. So let's talk about the models here. So this is kind of where, we kind of get all in a frenzy. This is the models. What you're looking at here is the European 0Z EPS ensembles. So right now what we're taking a look at here, again, this is your mean sea level pressure and your lows down here. So this is our two tropical storms right here. Obviously, up to the north, you've got your ridge of high pressure that's out across here. You've got your intertropical convergence zone, an area of lower pressures in here, and your associated trough in through here. So we'll kind of step this throughout time. We'll move this through about hour 72, which is right here. Now, you can already start to see there's a pretty significant gap here in some of the models with Tropical Storm Paulette. There's a pretty big gap here between where this is going to end up going, with some here showing a far south solution to some kind of showing a further north solution. So you kind of have a box in through there. That's Rene, and that's our new tropical wave coming off of Africa. Right now, you have a big ridge of high pressure that's going to start to be building in across the tropical Atlantic. That's going to shove our storms further off towards the west for the time being. But you have your other associated trough that's getting ready to kind of dig back in. We go out through hour 120 here, and again, this is where models differ. You've got model solutions that bring this further off towards the west here, and a further west solution than some others do, and that's, obviously something very interesting because, some of the model guidance today does suggest that this may get a little bit further off towards the west before it really has enough time, and then eventually recurve. On hour 144 here, we can start to see that little bit of a recurve signature that happens, and that does start to kind of impact such areas. So we are going to be monitoring to see how that kind of interacts. And again, this big trough, or this big ridge of high pressure that's kind of building in here, and then this trough, that's going to be the biggest question. By hour 192, we start to see more tropical waves coming off here. Again, a big model spread in the forecast here, anywhere from just off Bermuda to well towards the north and east of Bermuda is a possibility. So for folks obviously in Bermuda, it's just going to be something that you're going to have to monitor kind of as time goes on. But we probably shouldn't be seeing anything that significant, at least kind of with time. So that will be something that we are going to have to watch for. Now on to the GFS forecast here. This is the 500 millibar, or 18,400 feet in the atmosphere level. And again, you're looking at your ridge and troughs in the atmosphere. Again, your darker reds, that's your ridging. Your blues is anomalous troughing, anomalous low pressure. So we can see here, first of all, we have a big upper level low out here across the tropical Atlantic, from extending near the Azores, which is right here, that's the Azore Islands, all the way down south here into the tropical Atlantic. Now, what happens is this big upper level low is causing a lot of vertical wind shear just ahead of it out of the southwesterly direction. And what we can actually do here is plop on the 200 millibar winds, and we can kind of see that we have this big upper level low right here. That's our upper level low right there. And you notice the winds here are generally out of the southwesterly direction. So what this is doing is, as a storm is trying to head off towards the northwest, you have shear that's kind of meeting it out of the southwesterly direction. These two competing steering flows in the mid-levels of the atmosphere is helping to cause vertical wind shear in this whole entire region through here. So that's one of the things that's really not helping Paulette right now, is that as it moves northwest, you have strong vertical wind shear out of the southwest that causes these two competing steering flows and induces a lot of vertical wind shear. What this also does is help to cause vortex tilting, allows dry air to get entrained easily into the core of the system, and thus it actually starts to kind of reduce the potential for the storm to strengthen much further. Now, as we progress throughout time, this upper level low starts to kind of degrade across the tropical Atlantic. We get a big ridge of high pressure to start to build back in across, but there is still a kind of weakness in this ridge out through here. There's a big weakness in this ridge. So that is favoring our storms to kind of turn more towards the north. And that's what Rene is going to do, is going to start to turn more towards the north as it encounters this weakness in the ridge. Now, if we move out here to hour 170 or to hour 72, there's a pretty big weakness now degrading in this ridge, as we have a bunch of troughs kind of moving through the upper latitudes here through the Canadian Maritimes and through Greenland and Ireland and the United Kingdom. So these troughs in through here, that's going to significantly degrade our pattern. An area of low pressure once again starts to show up, and we get a general favorability for a recurve pattern in the Atlantic Basin. Now, eventually at hour 150, you don't even notice where Tropical Storm Paulette is, and that's because it's so weak in the model fields that it doesn't even show up in the higher latitudes, and that's something that we're going to have to watch for very carefully. But hour 150, we have this next tropical wave coming off here. This is coming off at a little bit lower of a latitude, so thus it's more susceptible to be moving due westernly. And eventually we get this trough here, but we also do get this ridge to start building back over the top of our system. And by hour 198, which is as far out as we're going to go here, that ridge starts to build back in, forcing our storm more kind of like that. So it is not something right now that is explicitly for land impacts, but that is something that we're going to have to watch. Now you can kind of see this here in the GFS 200 millibar flow here where Paulette is going to be. This is actually Paulette at hour 114 here. It is very weak and getting caught up in still a lot of southwesterly shear. Again, this is mainly in part due to a second upper level low that's sitting right here, inducing a lot of southwesterly shear across our system, and that is going to not really be helping our storms. So, and you can obviously see our big trough of low pressure. And then obviously Rene, though, is going to have a little bit more of a favorable kind of environment to work with. It should be located in an upper level anticyclone, which could also impact Paulette's outflow as well. But there is a pretty big upper level anticyclone around Rene that's expected to develop, which should allow for steady, if not rapid, intensification, and then eventually get caught up once again in the northerlies and also encounter less than favorable vertical wind shear and also less than favorable sea surface temperatures in that area. Now, for what it's worth here, this is the European 500 millibar geopotential height, again, kind of showing much of the same thing. Again, you can see here by hour 72, we have this upper level low that's kind of sitting through here. But we do have a little bit of a stronger ridge that's in through here. Now that ridge does start to break down, but we do subsequently get a new ridge to start building back in. This is our tropical wave coming off here, and this is also Paulette right here. Now Paulette is a little bit further off towards the west here in this run and does directly impact Bermuda. So for folks there, obviously in Bermuda, this is just something to watch as it could still get close enough and the track is not necessarily set in stone. It is entirely possible that this does get pushed a little bit further back off towards the west here before kind of moving off towards the north. Maybe something sort of like that. So now for direct impacts to the United States, again, right now it's just too far out in time, but there should not be any direct threats as it probably should catch this trough in through here and pull it out to sea. Right now, it's unlikely to catch this first trough, which is right here. It's unlikely to catch this and move on out, something like that. This ridge is going to start to be building back in, so that's going to push it a lot further off towards the east, or I'm sorry, towards the west. And this trough is going to be sliding eastward, so that's going to be something that we're going to have to watch. The GF or the kind of the HWRF models depicts this shear very well. You can see the exposed low-level center here at about 24 hours from now. Deep area of convection off towards the north that's not going to help sustain much. That convection does try to build, but then it becomes almost completely exposed here as southwesterly shear begins to increase. Our mid-level or our low-level vortex is in through here. Our shear completely decouples our storm and then finally tries to organize here back by hour 126. And again, this would be at about 25 north at this time. Compared to what the European had at about hour 120, the European was much more on those same lines at about 60 west and about 25 north or so, which is almost right where the other models have it, especially the Euro. So this is going to be something to watch. Again, generally and by and large, there should be a couple of waves that we're going to have to watch. Again, right now, the biggest concern at least in terms of significant, or in terms of land impacts kind of close in, is going to be from Invest Area 94L. In the long term, we're going to have to watch what will soon be Invest Area 95L. And then obviously for Pauletta, this system out here, it's not all set in stone just yet, and there could still be some model surprises that we have occurring. And obviously with Tropical Storm Rene, there's obviously still some uncertainty with that, but impacts to the Cabo Verde Islands should lessen as today progresses. All right. With that being said, I hope you all have a great rest of your afternoon and evening. Of course, I am Michael O'Malley, and I'll talk to you guys some more tomorrow afternoon. Stay safe, everyone. I'll talk to you guys again some more tomorrow.